Hello. I'm in the garden because it's sunny. It's our last day of sun, apparently. The rain starts tomorrow. I thought I'd talk about what I've been reading. I've been going mad about this. The Webbed Hand, Jenny Jones. This is something I must have picked up in a charity shop recently, I think, when I've had kind of 4 for £1 or something, or everything was 50p. I don't know what made me pick it up. I know there's lots of talk of point horror books of the 1990s, and they're sought after, and I remember my sister loved those books. I, of course, didn't read them at the time. Maybe I read 1 or 2. What I didn't read was point fantasy, and I wasn't really aware of them. I wish I had been. I've read this now, and that's been the last few days, and I just loved it. There's something just well made about it. My feeling is, looking at the lists of other books in the series, is that they got really good people to supply entries for this kind of monthly list. They were publishing maybe 1 a month. And the people that they mention, there's point science fiction as well. And again, they're really good people, sometimes with overlap. Names that I kind of recognise: Tamora Pierce and Patricia C. Reed, Susan Price, who I've definitely read since, and met actually when we were both at Simon & Schuster. And I think back to 1994. That's when I was, I guess, quite serious in my reading, in the sense that I was reading mostly literary fiction, I guess. I'd given up on the Doctor Who books for a year or 2, and I wasn't really reading series fiction or science fiction or fantasy so much, which, looking back, was a bit of a mistake. The 90s were a bit of a golden age. I remember living in Edinburgh in 95, and there was either T.G. Allen's or Menzies, it probably was, on Princes Street, like a massive department store that was all books and magazines and records, like W.H. Smith's used to be. And I remember seeing the Doctor Who books, the Virgin Doctor Who books, and things like point fantasy and point horror, and feeling a bit kind of grown up for them all, because I was the kind of advanced age of 25. But I look back, and there they are, coming out monthly, £3.50. A kind of friendly epic fantasy series of books, lots of different worlds. This one by Jenny Jones, and I've tried to look into what else she published. I think there's a sequel to this, and various dark horror things that she did. More epic fantasy for adults as well, I think. This is a world of trying to think what it's like. It's epic fantasy, so you've got different races occupying different parts of a countryside that's bordered by lakes and rivers, and you've got creatures who can manipulate water, those who can manipulate rocks. There are fireflies, these terrible lizardy creatures with no mouths but long protuberances that can burn things up in a flash, and they're the creatures that are going to be destroying everybody if things get out of hand. And we're with a princess and her handmaiden who escape a terrible marriage to this dreadful prince in this horrible country that they're taken to at the beginning of the book. And it's about their escape and joining a group of theatricals, and how they escape to a point where they can put everything right by magic and working together. And it just does the whole story in 300 pages. No messing about. And creating characters that you really like. Jugglers and mermaids and I forget what they call them now, the people who can manipulate water and see the future in it. So that's been smashing, and look at the size of the print. That's just perfect. reading size print for me. So of course I was straight onto eBay and World of Books and things to see if these things are available, and they are, luckily. I think there's about 30 in this series. It's not a series that connects. Some of them do connect with each other, but it's a umbrella series around the theme of fantasy. I think fantasy in the 90s for middle grade readers and young adults, which is what this is, was kind of spoiled after this by the big names coming in. So that Philip Pullman published his I forget what they call this, his Dark Materials with Point to start with, which is funny to look back on, and that's how I first read that book, first book. There's a series that goes off for me. Nothing's as good as the beginning. And of course Harry Potter coming along, which ruins not just children's fantasy fiction, but children's fiction completely, I think. I can't be the only children's author who did a million events in the early 2000s where the only question from the audience was, do you know J.K. Rowling? Do you sell as many as her? That's all they want to talk about, which was disheartening to say the least. I will tell you at some point more stories to do with doing book events like that. The people who organised those book events as well. I always remember doing one, doing 4 or 5 in a day around the schools of London, and the woman who'd organised it belonged to Waterstones, and she'd worked with schools and with publishers to bring authors into schools and run them ragged. And I did 4 or 5 different school visits in a day, and at lunchtime they took me for a sandwich to a pub, and the woman in charge of it all was very pleased with herself at the success of it all. And she said, well, you know, we get authors in. She said, she forgot who she was talking to for a second, because she said, we don't get J.K. Rowling or Philip Pullman or Anne Fine or the likes of them. We get the likes of you. We have to make do. And then looked appalled at herself, realising what she was saying. But it was true. You know, people who were only too keen to work for nothing to get word about their own books out there. Anyway, that was, looking back, I wish I'd stayed at home and read things like Point Fantasy, to be honest. Anyway, I've ordered a batch more from these lists, and then looking online to see what was there. I'm intrigued as well by Point SF. I do think it would have been a lovely thing to have, to bridge over going from reading kids' books to adult science fiction and fantasy. What a clever thing to do for a publisher. It's almost like how I always describe Newton Aycliffe Library with the children's section, and then you had science fiction with things like the Star Trek books to bridge you over into reading adult books. Speaking of which, my next read, my friend Jenny, I mentioned earlier this week, sent me this. She went looking for it and found it. This is the last of the literary adaptations of the original show, J.A. Lawrence's Mud's Angels. And in a way, it's not that I didn't go looking for it, it's that I held it off because I know it's the end of it. This series that I began reading in 1984. That's crazy, isn't it? It's almost superstitiously I didn't go looking for it, but how wonderful to be sent it as a gift. So it feels like holiday reading, which I realise it kind of is, with the sun out for as long as it's going to last, and the Easter break coming up. So I'm still feeling a bit holiday-ish with holiday books. Although I did end up working a fair bit this week when I wasn't supposed to. I've kind of firmed up ideas for the 2 short stories that I'm due to write in the next little while. Anyway, that's everything, I think. I hope everyone's well, and I will check in again in a couple of days. Okay, goodbye.